Shalom Aleichem.
Good evening. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight at Koleinu, Our Voices, the Jewish Museum of Maryland's annual meeting. I'm Zoe Resnick-Gawanter, Director of Public Programs, and as the JMM's newest staff member, I'm not only excited to be here myself, but delighted that we get to be joined here by everyone on site and at home. Thank you for celebrating our work this year together. Koleinu, the Hebrew word meaning our voices, has a daily appearance in the Jewish liturgy, specifically the Amidah, the standing prayer. Some of you might be familiar with standing meetings. The Jewish people have a standing prayer. The prayer calls on God to hear our voices. In the same spirit, we too are compelled to hear the voices of everyone in order to create a more compassionate and thriving community. Tonight's program will feature many voices, including reflections from people who have been impacted and inspired to action by the museum's work over the past year. We will hear from radio legend Marc Steiner in conversation about how some of the history depicted in our current exhibition, Blacklist, the Hollywood Red Scare, touched Jewish people in Baltimore, and much more. Tonight marks 2 years to the day since the police murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis. Before we move forward, I want to hold space and recognize how that act of brutality galvanized people around the world to actively reckon with the legacies and ongoing realities of racialized violence. And now, it's my pleasure to introduce you to our very first voice, Nancy Cutler, Chair of the Board of the Jewish Museum of Maryland. Welcome, Nancy.
Thank you, Zoe. It's hard when you talk about voices that have been extinguished, like George Floyd, not to take a moment just to pause to remember the young children and teachers who died yesterday in Texas. Good evening. It's so nice to welcome so many of you here in person and also so many of you at home. This is our first attempt to have a hybrid annual meeting, so keep our fingers crossed that all goes smoothly. When I spoke at the annual meeting last year, which was entirely on Zoom, I reflected on the 2020-2021 year as a year of unprecedented challenges. Once we realized that COVID was clearly here to stay, we spent the year creating opportunities from the new and the unexpected challenges. We found creative ways to connect with our audiences. We accelerated to digital programming and to virtual tours. And instead of snapping back to our prior form, we adapted and we retooled. So here we are, a year later in 2022, and we are still in the process of adapting and retooling. But this year, we had a year of experience to draw upon. We developed, under Sal's leadership, a highly skilled staff that will carry JMM into the next era. We executed participatory and socially engaged museum practices using the Feldman Gallery as a staging ground. We expanded the demographics of the people who engage with JMM, and we built relationships with Jewish communities beyond Baltimore. So what's in store in the year ahead? We continue to adapt, reset, and reimagine. Sal has put together an accomplished team, as you could see just from that opening number, loaded with enthusiasm and creativity. We have an exciting exhibit schedule planned, which includes what's currently underway, Blacklist, the Hollywood Red Scare, which will be followed by an exhibit in December called The Power of Protest, which will be on the Soviet Jewry movement, that will be paired with the works of two genre-defining artists from Odessa. We will reactivate our capital plan with a phased-in approach which begins addressing existing needs in our current building, including the addition of a production studio, along with some much-needed renovations and updates. And I promise you new chairs, even if Ed and I have to take care of it ourselves. I promise you new chairs. And lastly, we will continue to serve as the convener for young Jewish adult groups in Baltimore City. This effort continues to solidify my vision for JMM to be the linchpin for Jewish life downtown. And these are only a few of the many initiatives we have planned for the year ahead. But before I close my opening remarks, I just want to convey some important thank yous. Specifically, first, thanks to my officers and the board for the time and talent and resources you've devoted to our work, to Sal and his very talented staff for the devotion that they bring day in and day out to advance our mission, to the Associated for its unwavering support, and Beth, I mean it, unwavering, both human and financial, to our partners in the Jonestown community and beyond, and lastly, to our members, our supporters, and our visitors. We could not do what we do without you. It has been a pleasure serving as your president this past year, and I invite you to join me as we reimagine the future of JMM together. That's mine. Okay, so now we're going to move into the business portion of the meeting, and I'm going to present the report of the nominating committee and the proposed slate for 2022-23. First, I'd like to thank the nominating committee for their hard work this past year. Bonnie Hennison, Robert Keene, Abe Kronsberg, Michael Saxon, Michelle Gordon, Harriet Wims, and Duke Zimmerman. And I also just want to reiterate for just a moment what our priorities were in putting our board together this year and in identifying new people to add to the board. We wanted to continue to work to diversify the composition of the board to more fully reflect the community. We wanted to bring a greater range of pertinent experience around the board table, and we wanted to bring in members from a broader geographic region across Maryland. So for those of you at home, you will be seeing the slide. I want to start with the middle section and introduce the slate of officers for the coming year. Myself as president for a third year, Erica Reef Hornstein, first vice president, or senior vice president. I'm going to take the prerogative of the chair for a moment and talk about Erica. I cannot tell you how thrilled I am for somebody like Erica to be being our senior vice president, to be nominated to be our president this time next year. Erica started here as a college intern. She was also a docent and a board member since 2019. She's been on many of our committees, visioning, marketing, outreach, and engagement, and the executive director search. In fact, during our search process, where we were interviewing Saul and he wanted a tour of the neighborhood, it was Erica who we called on to give him a virtual tour, walking around with her phone, her camera. And she also has a multi-generational connection to B'nai Israel, where she and John and Dahlia are members. And she's chairing our young adult outreach effort, which to me is such a key to our future. So Erica as senior vice president, Jeff Scher and Roberta Greenstein as vice presidents, Ira Malice as treasurer, Lola Hahn as secretary, and Robert Keene as immediate past president. I just want to take a moment to give a special thanks to Jerry Max, who just completed 4 years as treasurer. Jerry is there. As I said to Jerry over and over, you are every president's dream, treasurer. Jerry did not miss a beat. Always on top of every detail, had an amazing ability to explain complex budget issues clearly and concisely, and provided unwavering support to me, to Sal, and to the board. Jerry, we will miss you as treasurer, but we will not let you get far because you are still going to continue on the board. So we're happy to be able to continue to use Jerry's expertise. Okay. The nominees in the right-hand column, the far column, there are 4 people who are existing board members that are beginning new terms: Neri Cohn, Anita Kassoff, Suzanne Levin-Lapidus, and Jerry Max. And there are 3 new board members that are being nominated tonight: Sandra Deja, Justin Fair, and Marcia Semmel. And now I'd just like to draw your attention to the full board membership on the left.
Nancy, sorry.
Yep. Oh.
I realize there's one omission.
Oh, really?
And that is that Jill Max isn't listed on the JMM board membership. That's my fault.
Okay.
Jill, I'm sorry about that.
I'm glad you caught it. I missed it today, too. Okay. 2 Maxes. That was the... And now, just before I conclude and ask for a motion, I want to thank 3 outgoing board members: Bob Gaiman, Sarah Lynn Glass, and Claire Tesh. I know Bob is here with us tonight. Bob is, thank you, Bob. And I know the others are joining us online. I cannot thank you enough for the time, the talent, the resources that you all brought and devoted to JMM, and I just hope you continue to stay close to us in as many ways as possible in the years ahead. I'd now like to just ask for a motion to approve the slate of nominees to the JMM Board of Trustees for 2022-23. Can I have a motion? May I have a second? Okay, all in favor? Okay, the motion has passed, and we now have approved our new board membership. I'm now going to call upon and be pleased to call upon Beth Goldsmith, Chair of the Board of the Associated, to bring remarks on behalf of the Associated.
Thanks, Nancy, and hello, everyone. Thank you all for being here, and good evening to you, as everyone has before me has said. I really am so happy to be here this evening, certainly with you here in person and with everyone at home watching as well. It's really nice to see people in person, and hopefully this is just the beginning of more gatherings and opportunities to see the museum's work in action. And what a year it has been for the team here at the Jewish Museum. With new professional team members at the Jewish Museum, there's a new energy. You have created vibrant offerings that are so timely in today's news. From the Fences Around the Torah exhibit to the Blacklist exhibit, the stories you are sharing and the voices you are lifting up are critical and inspiring, particularly during these uncertain times. And how fitting it is that your theme tonight is Koleinu, our voices. The foundation of the museum is just that, the voice of our community, telling our history, using our collective memory, and capturing the essence of Jewish Baltimore throughout the centuries. As a beneficiary agency of the Associated, together we tell the story of Jewish Baltimore. We enrich lives through education, demonstrate that history, arts, and culture are critical to our community, and showcase the vibrant and diverse voices that encompass Jewish Baltimore. It is our partnership and collaboration that enables the Associated to fulfill its mission of a vibrant Jewish community for all Baltimoreans. The Jewish Museum holds a special place in the Associated Network. You're an instrumental partner in revitalizing this neighborhood of Jonestown. You're committed to building a just world, and you create a welcoming space for all people to explore our rich culture and history. The museum has grown into a shining example of Baltimore's uniqueness and commitment to diversity and to growth. I'm delighted that the relationship between the Associated and JMM has never been stronger. Special thanks to Nancy Cutler for her partnership as chair of the board and for helping to navigate this very, very challenging time. And congratulations to Saul Davis for absolutely thriving during his first year as executive director. And thank you to all of you for being our partner and our storyteller. I look forward to working with all of you on Baltimore's growth and ensuring creative and relevant programming for your neighborhood, for the Jewish community, and all those seeking a voice and a story in our world. Thank you. And now I have the pleasure and privilege of introducing your executive director, Saul Davis.
Good evening, everyone. I am Saul Davis, delighted to be here with you all. I appreciate you choosing to be here with us, whether at the museum or in the Zoom room. Thank you for making this time to celebrate this program year with us and take this initial step into the hybrid space, the hybrid future with us tonight. I want to extend a hearty mazel tov and stroke of gratitude to our board of directors, incoming, outgoing, and continuing. Deep gratitude to Nancy for agreeing to continue on for a third year as our board president. And thanks to Erica for taking the big step into the senior VP position, a position that situates you as Nancy's successor 1 year from now. Where are you? Oh, there you are. I wanted to be looking into your eyes at that moment. Thanks to Ira Malice for stepping up into the treasurer position. I'm excited about the ongoing evolution of the JMM board and recognize that so much of our institutional strength is derived from our robust board of directors. So thank you to our board, thank you to our partners at the Associated. We recently completed our budgeting process for fiscal year 2023. It was a months-long process, and throughout that process, we were continuously reminded of the many, many ways we're supported by the Associated. And I want to take a moment to highlight that support with this visual infographic. I'll give you a moment to take that in. And while you view some of the various supports that the JMM receives from the Associated, I want to add some detail to that third bullet point to let you know that those Associated administered grants support a range of our work, including digital preservation of our collections, young adult engagement, education, outreach, and more. So thanks again to the Associated. I want to extend my deepest thanks to our staff, the heartbeat, the daily pulse, the rhythm, the melody, and as you heard, the multivocal harmony of this museum. Our staff continues to persevere through these very challenging times. We have an amazing team of professionals. I'm grateful to be a part of it. And throughout this evening's program, you'll have the opportunity to see and hear from many members of our museum staff. I'm sure many of you have had the experience of feeling a different kind of relationship with time during this pandemic. Things are simultaneously occurring at a glacial pace and racing by, while also seeming to loop around on repeat. There's a kind of paradoxical effect in this moment. It's simultaneously difficult to plan and chart the course forward, while it's also a time full of opportunity for innovation, for experimentation, for some fun, for creativity. So working through these times, I've continuously tried to force myself to pull back to the 30,000-foot view and think about the evolution of our work at the museum with that long view in mind. And when I pull back and look at all that's been accomplished this year, I take great pride in what we've been able to do under such challenging circumstances. You heard Nancy speak about it, Beth as well. I just want to highlight a couple of things, a couple of the many things that our staff does every day that are not so visible to the public. One of those is caring for our vast collection of Jewish material culture that includes the Lloyd Street Synagogue and B'nai Israel. We also develop educational programs for students in a variety of educational settings and have put a new emphasis on supporting educators with professional development programs and resources. This year, we also constituted an education committee that's chaired by Jill Max, whose name I failed to include on our board of directors list there accidentally. Apologies for that again. That committee includes scholars, public school teachers, administrators, Jewish day school teachers, and others with a background in education. This museum, the Jewish Museum of Maryland, we're the keepers, the caretakers, the stewards of our communal history. Our communal history is the social and cultural glue of our community. We're the holders of the material culture that allows us to tell our communal story. Our collections give material, visual, oral, and documentary form to the stories we tell about who we are and how we came to be who we are. The museum and its work does not stand alone. Our work is deeply woven into our communal system. And not only do we care for our communal history, we are the primary storytellers of that history. We have the tools for telling the story of who we are, and I believe that those stories act as a kind of magic in the world. Looking to the year ahead, our capital project will allow the architecture and physical space to take the forms needed to support and advance a post-pandemic museum. In all of this work, we're developing participatory practices, working to expand and diversify the communities we work with, and serve as a platform that draws on our communal past to help us imagine and build a just and abundant Jewish future. I want to thank you all for the many ways that you support this work. And with that, we will turn our focus to some highlights from A Fence Around the Torah. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. It's really wonderful to be able to gather with you all in person and virtually. I'll take off my mask. My name's Naomi Weintraub. I'm working at the JMM this year as the community artist in residence. I'm really excited to introduce this next video because not only did I get to support the production of the Fence Around the Torah exhibition, but I had my own artwork, Jewish Ritual as Rebellion, in the exhibit. In this video, we'll be able to hear reflections on the fence exhibit from community members. I hope you enjoy.
Our rabbis teach that we place a fence around the Torah in order to protect the community from straying too far from tradition. How powerful to view the exhibit, A Fence Around the Torah, Safety and Unsafety in Jewish Life, with video, spoken word, sculpture, and painting that describes those who feel marginalized or cut off from our Jewish community.
From Hebrew school, my bar mitzvah, Hillel, I was always striving to say, I want to feel home. I want to feel welcome here. But in reality, there were little markers in the culture that would say, oh, actually, there's an asterisk next to your name.
The show and the questions that we responded to really went there. And I think that in order to get there to the proverbial, where it is that we ideally want to be, we have to go there.
We need to be taking advantage of these opportunities to talk about our differences, to embrace them so that we can come together more as a community, so that we can feel that we can rely on one another.
Part of what I found so moving and exciting and even a little bit healing about Fence was getting to engage about my work with my Jewish elders, with members of the Baltimore community who maybe don't share my politics or don't share my views, and in real conversation with them, with an assumption of goodwill on both sides. That's unusual in my experience of Jewish discourse.
This exhibition really centers questioning as a positive and also a demand that you're supposed to ask questions.
On the heels of seeing this exhibit, at least for our organization, we really saw a substantial increase in the number of members and leaders that have been coming out who have varying identities and relationships within the community.
Loving, challenging discourse, that's why I make what I make. Fence provided that because the show was so clearly about artists who care deeply about Jewish life, the Jewish future, the Jewish past, all that stuff, but might care from a different angle.
Typically, we want to only see things as museum pieces when they have been passed down or donated. I think this exhibition won't allow that. It says, if you care about ritual and you want to honor your parents and you want to honor your community, take this in. Sit with it, feel with it.
It's important for us as a Jewish community to understand our past and also to look at the present and where we hope to move to.
I am just so grateful to exhibits like this and platforms that JMM are offering really to such a diverse array of young people in our community, to give people a sense of comfort and inclusion that then makes them feel comfortable taking on these types of leadership roles.
Going forward, this can really be a model for bringing up other things that come up.
It's saying, what legacy do I want to leave forward?
Hi, I'm Leora Ostroff, the curator of Fence. And I just wanted to say that when the Department of Equity and Cultural Proficiency at Baltimore County Public Schools came to tour A Fence Around the Torah in February, it was really clear to me that the themes and questions that the show investigates within Jewish communities are really pertinent to all communities. And when they came, we focused really in on two areas within the exhibition. First, we went to queer Queer Life, where we listened to Joy Layden read a poem aloud. And we talked about the power of poetry in conveying powerful experiences and feelings that are both highly relatable and highly specific. And in the security section, the questions invoked by both Rage Collective's powerful pieces and by Marissa Baggett's paintings sparked a discussion about how these topics, white supremacist violence and racialized security systems and disloyalty, are translated through different contexts, here represented through Jewish experiences. And now I'm pleased to welcome Douglas H. Handy, who is the Executive Director of the Department of Equity and Cultural Proficiency at BCPS.
Leora, thank you. And I want to thank Leora and Saul again for hosting us. Just a little backstory. It was in February. And if you think about what we've gone through with COVID, it was the first time our team had actually gone out, really outside of our little bubble, if you will. So we were getting back together, we were meeting in the office, and our goal, our mission in Baltimore County Public Schools is through professional development, through providing resources, through coaching, to provide a more equitable learning experience for each student in BCPS. And a big part of that is, the second part of our name, if you will, the cultural proficiency. So how do we become more cultural proficient as a team? How do I become more culturally proficient? Well, I need to reflect on my own culture, but I need to learn about others' cultures as well. And Saul has been really a godsend for me when we met and connected in so many ways. And Saul serves on a equity committee, an advisory committee for me. And when he told me I could either come down in person to see the exhibit or I could, experience it virtually, we went back and forth, and the team was just unanimous. It's only 6 of us, and they're like, we got to go, field trip. And if you think about what we, as educators, we provide for students, we want them to have these field trips to broaden their horizons and give them new perspectives. So that's what the trip did for us. So I'm just going to share some brief comments that I did share with Saul and Leora after our visit. So I said the exhibit, A Fence Around the Torah, provided a memorable cultural experience for the BCPS Department of Equity and Cultural Proficiency. We appreciate the time that Saul and Leora took to provide a guided tour for our 6-member department. There were several aspects of the exhibit that still resonate with me. For example, the questions that accompanied each section helped me examine my own thoughts, beliefs, feelings, and actions before viewing each section. After experiencing and internalizing the artworks, rereading the questions helped me to self-examine again. Reflecting upon my identity and my lived experiences as a Black man, the question, when does what makes some feel safe make others feel unsafe, from the security section of the exhibit resonated with me the most. Lastly, I appreciate the enduring value of the exhibit booklet and the online exhibit content, which allow me to revisit the exhibit today. And this is my copy. I know there's some in the book, but I'm glad to have this, and I'd go online and really just appreciate the experience, and for Saul and other members of the JMM to welcome me here this evening and really into the space overall. So thank you all very much.
Hello, everyone. Hi, I'm Justin Fair. I'm a new board member here.
And my name is Erica Hornstein, and I'm a board member of the Jewish Museum of Maryland.
We are here to talk with you, FDR style, fireside chat, about the young adult engagement here at the museum. The museum's become this active institution. It's building a Jewish community downtown. Erica, what makes this the right place?
Well, it's no secret that the majority of young adults and some Jewish families live downtown. But there's limited infrastructure for Jewish gathering spaces. And a few months ago, we gathered a bunch of leaders of different organizations, Jewish organizations downtown, and they said that the Jewish Museum really has the potential to be this welcoming space, a welcoming space for Jews regardless of their Jewish educational background, what movement they affiliate with, their gender identity, and there's so much potential here. If you think about it like a Hillel model, where you can have different services happening, the Orthodox service, the yoga service, and then afterwards, everyone meeting together for Shabbat dinner. The Jewish Museum can be that equivalent downtown for young adults and young families. Why do you think this is the right time for that?
I think about the people here. If you look at how we see success, I think that it's a matter of looking at those metrics differently. From a young adult perspective, like Saul, Trillian, where you at? We are like young board members, and we're activating the ears of the established leadership here. Look at Fence. It was really magnetic. Why do you think it was such a magnetic model?
Well, Fence was built in Saul's vision of a participatory model, which meant that there were so many different levels of involvement, from the curator in residence, the selection committee, the artists, and each of those people had their own networks that they were able to engage in the work, both in Baltimore and beyond, audiences that had never engaged with the Jewish Museum of Maryland before. And Justin, that's how you got more involved with the museum, right?
Yeah, I think we have to remember it's so important to pull those who are already involved here and refresh that for them, make it hungry in a new way. What's next?
Well, we've got a few things going on. So first of all, over the last 4 years, we've now added at least 4 young adult board members to our board of trustees, which is really fabulous to hear diverse perspectives. We're also building a young adult advisory council so that those members can help us create relevant programming from the exhibits and other programming to help engage young adults throughout the city and the Baltimore area. And we just received a grant from the Blacklist Foundation in order to have staff support to support the work of this advisory council. So all really exciting stuff. And our hope is to evoke conversations that might be rooted in the past, but speak to the present and, of course, the future across generations. And I have to say, for me, it's especially important and pretty surreal, because to think that my great-grandfather 100 years ago was walking these same streets and asking the same questions, being my age, how best to shape the community. So it's pretty cool. What are your dreams?
Before I looked at the museum as being focused on just creating the groundwork of this regional collection. I dream of us paying that investment forward, creating routine settings often where we as young people stir the pot, where we get together for coffee or for drinks or for walks, where we have an opportunity to socialize and energize. So I dream of that energy building.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Erica. Thank you very much.
And now we're going to hear about the Jewish Museum's current exhibition, Blacklist, the Hollywood Red Scare.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Noah Mitchell. I am the Visitor Experiences Coordinator here at the museum. And so part of what I do here is lead our virtual experiences, where I'm leading people through exhibit content virtually. And so I've been able to do that with the Blacklist exhibit. And so I just wanted to share quickly just like a couple of some of the takeaways that I have, some of the things that I'm sitting with so far from the exhibit that I've learned. The exhibit, it deals with a very specific part of the anti-communist and anti-labor story, but I think that that's good because it enables us to really dive deep into specifics and to some nitty-gritty details. But it's also fun because it has the glamour that comes with talking about Hollywood and famous people like Zero Mostel and Elia Kazan. So I think there's a lot, a couple of examples of specifics that I learned are that, for instance, several members of the House Un-American Activities Committee, or HUAC, were also members of the KKK. And when the arts community tried to push HUAC to investigate the KKK, one committee member responded, quote, "The threats and intimidations of the Klan are an old American custom, like illegal whiskey making." Or that the FBI had this to say about a film called Gentleman's Agreement, in which a journalist poses as a Jew to expose anti-Semitism in the Connecticut suburbs. They said, quote, "A police lieutenant is party to anti-Semitism, and as such is subjected to much criticism. This was a deliberate effort to discredit law enforcement." Blacklisting existed before the Hollywood Red Scare, and it actually began as a weapon against trade unions in the 19th century. And so during the period that this exhibit is talking about, the state, with the aim, at least ostensibly, of preventing the spread of communism, which at that point was largely being carried out in the form of authoritarian states, the state here in America used some authoritarian tactics themselves. So I'll now hand it over to my colleague Mark Gunnery with our guest speaker Marc Steiner, to expand the scope of our engagement with this history and with these ideas.
Thanks, Noah.
I can take this off for a minute. Good. Good. And so the old man gets a cushion. That's nice. Good.
So, hi, everyone. Like Noah said, my name is Marc Gunnery. I am the Director of Communications and Content for the JMM. And I'm also the host of the Disloyal podcast, which is our new weekly podcast that comes out every Friday. It's a podcast about art, culture, history, and it uses our exhibits and programs and collections as launch pads for talking about political, cultural, and spiritual trends that are shaping the world today through a distinctively Jewish lens. And the title, Disloyal, refers to this anti-Semitic trope that says that Jews are disloyal, but it also refers to the way that social, religious, political issues in the Jewish community are often understood in terms of loyalty or disloyalty. So the podcast asks, what does it mean to be loyal or disloyal to a people, to a state, to an idea, to a family, to a political commitment? And that question is especially relevant to the themes of our exhibit Blacklist, the Hollywood Red Scare, which covers a time in history when the question of disloyalty was front and center. We published in the 2009-2010 issue of Generations magazine from the Jewish Museum of Maryland an article called Enduring Idealism, Baltimore Jews and the Communist Party by Leonard M. Helfgott. And it was a really fascinating article that covers the story of communist Jews in Baltimore from the 30s, when Jewish Baltimoreans went to Spain to fight fascists as part of the Abraham Lincoln Brigade, through the political repression of the 40s and 50s, and fights for racial, labor, economic justice throughout the mid-20th century. And joining us to talk a little bit about that history is Marc Steiner. Marc Steiner is a Baltimore radio legend, a longtime political activist. He was the host of the Marc Steiner Show for many years and is now podcasting at the Real News Network. He's a founder of WYPR and my old boss. So hello, Marc Steiner. So Mark, at the onset, can you tell us a little bit about your connection to the history of communism and the Red Scare here in Maryland?
I refuse to answer that question. Well, it's interesting. It goes back a bunch. There's a couple of different stories here. One, there was a guy in the Communist Party who was a famous lawyer in the city. His name was Harold Buckman, and Harold's brother actually lived across the street from me when I was a kid. So I remember when then Mr. Buckman, he became Harold to me later, would come visit his brother, and more than once he created a conversation inside our house. And because my father was, who liked Harold but was a staunch anti-communist, and my mother, who had been a member of the Communist Party in England for 6 months, in Britain, had very different ideas about what that meant. And when I was a kid, I became, at 14, when I was kind of in the civil rights movement, I had joined this group called the Young Socialist Alliance, which wasn't the Communist Party, it was a Trotskyist party when I was a little boy. But there was a communist bookstore in Baltimore called the New Era Bookshop, which was on Park Avenue, which was then Baltimore's Chinatown. And so I got to know these folks in the party really well. And they were, I mean, as a civil rights worker, you know that the majority of white civil rights workers were Jews, and which many people don't realize. And a lot of them, the older ones, had been members of the Communist Party. So you got to kind of really interact with people who were of an older generation who went through things that I only began to learn about then. So, you know, I mean, it's, they were the heart and soul of labor and civil rights in many ways in the city.
So Mark, in the mid-20th century, the Communist Party here in Maryland was pretty massive and also pretty Jewish. Can you give us a sense of how widespread communism was in the Jewish community at this time?
It's hard, widespread, you know. I wouldn't think of it as much widespread. It had depth more than spread in terms of its influence. There were people in the communist, well, first of all, look, when I was a kid, there were 2 Yiddish newspapers. And one was the Freiheit, and the other was the Forwards. And the Freiheit was a communist paper, and the Forwards was kind of more of a democratic socialist paper. My grandfather was a socialist. He used to get the Forwards. But the presence was huge among Jews in the labor movement and on the left. They were here. I mean, Jews, you know, there were numbers of Jews who were major capitalists and landlords and more, but there were also Jews who were union members. And so they came out of the unions, out of the Bakers Union with my grandfather. Jews who worked in the steel mills, Jews who worked in the maritime unions. I mean, they went in to make a living, and they also went in to organize. You know, it was, they led, many of the Jewish communists were part of the leadership that led this march in 1934 that marched from Baltimore to Washington. They actually called their group, I want to get this right, they called the group the Maritime Soviet, or the Soviet Maritime. They organized among the maritime workers and provided assistance and housing and more and legal help. And so they were there. And they were there again in 1942 when there was another march, this time in Annapolis, with black and Jewish communists at the lead, demanding what they called the double V: victory against fascism in Europe and victory against segregation in Maryland and the United States. So, you know, they were always at the heart of all the struggles.
So leaders of Maryland's Communist Party faced serious political repression, including arrest under the Smith Act for allegedly advocating the violent overthrow of the U.S. government. What effects did this repression have on people who were targeted for investigation here in Baltimore, including some of the people that you knew personally, like Maurice Braverman, Harold Brookman, and others?
And Maurice and Dorothy Bloomberg. I mean, the Bloombergs went to jail, and Maurice Braverman went to jail. And
the Bloombergs were the head of the...
He was the head of the party, and his wife went to jail first. He went underground, he got caught, and then went to jail. And got beaten up really severely when he was in jail. I remember those stories from him. and Dorothy. He really, I mean, he was beaten badly in prison and lost vision in one eye. And Maurice went to jail, and Maurice was a lawyer, and he got out, and he actually took decades, but he was allowed back in the bar. I got to understand this more when I got older, because there were children, my generation of people, who are now in their 70s, who were the children of the members of the party. And they remember vividly having to fight other kids in the schoolyard, being called commie and red baby and other things in the schoolyard growing up. It was a very fearful time for those folks. But people stood strong. Harold Buckman, who I mentioned before, Harold was like, people don't realize about Harold Buckman was not just a lawyer, he was also a screenwriter. And you can, IMBD, right? I don't want to go through the words wrong. The initials wrong. IMBD, yes. So if you look him up, he was a screenwriter in like at least 15 different films. So he was also part of the whole movement against Jews in Hollywood. But he defended a lot of people. Everybody we mentioned, he defended before HUAC. Then he went on to defend the Black Panther Party and defend people like me, who was facing 25 years in prison in the early 70s. And it was a movement that was so powerful beyond their numbers. Let me just say one other thing, is that it wasn't a mistake that so many Jews were in the Communist Party. I mean, radical revolutionary movements attract the oppressed, and Jews were the oppressed. And, I was a little boy, Lombard Street was a place where you came down and you went with your grandfather, grandparents, and got your chickens, and they killed them on the spot. But it was a working class, alive place that you could breathe it. Everybody speaking Yiddish, and they were all either reading the Freiheit or they're reading the forwards. So there's no mistake why people became radicals against the system.
So we got time for one more question.
Am I talking too much, Mark?
No, you're talking just enough. We're borrowing this exhibit from Jewish Museum Milwaukee. Can you connect us with the history to Baltimore by sharing any other stories from anyone else that we might know, whether that's Howard Silverberg, Bernard Adas, Tupac Shakur, Albert Blumberg, some Baltimore communists?
I know. Howard Silverberg was, a couple of stories. Howard Silverberg was, you couldn't miss Howard. Howard was like, I don't know, he was 6'4", 6'6". He was a tall guy, really tall, and a deep voice, and a major presence, and fearless. He has been a longshoreman. He'd been a maritime worker. He was a steel worker. I remember when I first started working at WJHU in 1993, I had not seen Howard, I don't know, 10, 15 years more or whatever. And I walked into the little morning shop, and Howard stood up and raised his fist in the air and was starting to sing the Internationale. And so I had not seen him, but it was great seeing him again, and we spent a lot of time just talking. But he was a fearless organizer. Nothing could make Howard back down from that. Who are the other people you meant? Oh, so Tupac. So Tupac, he was not Jewish, by the way.
Not Jewish.
Right. So Tupac Shakur was my student at Baltimore School for the Arts when I taught there. And so when he was my student, he was a member of the Young Communist League because his mother was a communist. And so, when I discovered that, he and I talked a lot about that and actually introduced Tupac to a lot of the old commies who were still around that he didn't know and his mom didn't know because they were no longer really active in the party. But the Communist Party is one of the few places, let me just end with this, that where blacks and Jews came together. And you have to remember that Maryland was a southern state. It was a segregated city, a segregated state. And the Communist Party, actually led by Jews, had dances and gatherings where blacks and whites would sit together, dance together, eat together, and it was revolutionary. I mean, it didn't happen anywhere else. And so they really, without being given the credit, were kind of at the forefront of breaking down the kind of barriers of racism and segregation in our city.
Well, Mark, thanks so much.
My pleasure.
So thanks.
Don't get up yet.
Yeah, don't get up yet. So thanks, Mark. Up next, we have a sneak peek of Synagogue Stories, which is a video about the history of the Lloyd Street and B'nai Israel synagogues, which is going to be coming very soon to the JMM.
All right.
On this one little small street in Baltimore, you have two of the oldest synagogue buildings still standing in the country, and one of them still has services. It's pretty unique.
B'nai Israel represents continuity. There has always been a Jewish congregation practicing here.
The Lloyd Street Synagogue has changed many times because it changed from being a traditional synagogue to being a Reformed synagogue, to being a church, to being a traditional synagogue, and now it's a museum.
The city was founded in 1729. By 1780s or 90s, you do have recording of Jews living in Baltimore.
Baltimore was actually the second largest port behind Ellis Island, so a lot of immigrants, when they came off the boat, ended up settling in this area in Jonestown.
Baltimore town was on the west side of Jones Falls, and Jonestown was on the east side. Eventually, the two communities merged together. So it is among the oldest neighborhoods in the city.
Because of Jones Falls, we were surrounded by swamps and wetlands, and then had to create houses and roads and structures on top of it.
Filling in and building, and like I guess many cities, constantly rebuilding itself.
This was the neighborhood where a lot of the Jewish people and all the immigrants settled. For many years, there were many different kinds of immigrants settled in this area near the harbor.
Immigrants coming from places that were more rural would have found a bit of marvel in just the busy, crowded streets of Jonestown.
If you were walking down Lombard Street in the early 1800s, it probably wouldn't smell too good because of all the horse-drawn carriages and vehicles on the street.
There was a variety of things. It wasn't just an exclusively Jewish area, because both the Jews and the Italian community were right next to each other.
I imagine you were hoping to see a little bit more. So I want to thank all of our speakers and special guests for joining us tonight. It's been such a pleasure to be together with you here. As we wrap up our program, it's my pleasure to share with you what our JMM team, who you have not heard from our entire team this evening, is aspiring to as we carry out the JMM's mission and lend our voices to the work. So, audience expanding exhibits, meaningful, nuanced stories, be good neighbors, music, ground up engagement, more accessible spaces, graduate educator cohort, informative interactive programs, activating outdoor spaces, music. Don't forget our previous audience, engaged, expanded audiences, past, present, and future. I want to extend a personal thank you to all of my colleagues who have helped in making tonight's celebration a reality. Please join me in applauding the JMM staff who have worked with such dedication, creativity, and care this year. And with that, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. We look forward to connecting with you very, very soon. Good night.